So we're going to start with preliminary research processes and information literacy. So kind of a two-part presentation. We're going to be talking about preliminary research 1, tertiary sources first, and then we're going to do preliminary research 2, the CRAP test and recognizing low quality sources next. So we're going to start with tertiary sources. So we're going to talk about using tertiary sources the right way. Tertiary sources are references like Wikipedia, things that we've been told sometimes not to use. They're overview sources. They're really good jumping off points because they're things like timelines, definitions, encyclopedias, histories, your like information on like a large subject area. Like if you pull up a website that says like about and then the name of the subject, or if I just look up a page, if I was looking up standardized testing and I found a page that was just about standardized testing, it gave me a lot of information about it. Typically, that's going to be something that's tertiary. It's going to give you information about a new subject when you're getting started, quick like lookups of factual information, like lists of facts, recommendations for detailed sources, like the bibliography that we're putting together. So new information, overview information, resources, things like that. So we're going to start breaking this down. Primary, secondary, and tertiary sources by going through the publishing process and the order in which things get published. So we start with primary sources. They happen first because they are in the moment. They are your interviews, speeches, diaries, birth certificates, journal articles, press conferences, films, song lyrics, things that are kind of original and in the moment. For instance, if I was looking at 9/11, I would be using news articles, press conferences, videos, interviews, things that came out at that time. If I'm talking about like COVID, then I'm talking about my very recent information that's coming out like at this time about that issue. So those come out first. Next is secondary sources because they comment on the issue by analyzing primary sources. They are your biographies, journal articles, sometimes textbooks, commentaries, editorials. A lot of articles are secondary because they provide commentary on the issue, because they analyze and interpret primary data. They come out next. So an article that came out in 2005 about 9/11 that used images and interviews and news articles from that time would be secondary. Tertiary comes after. It's way more removed and it gathers mostly from secondary sources. So it's using secondary sources that come later already to talk about issues. So again, more removed from the issue that compile data on a particular topic. So collections or lists of primary and secondary sources like encyclopedias, bibliographies, abstracts, indexes, library catalogs, databases, information pages, lists of facts, things like that. Okay, so we move from primary to tertiary when we're publishing. When we do research, we work backward. We start with tertiary because they teach or report in a more general sense and they help us understand an issue before we get into the meat, into the secondary and the primary sources that provide the expert commentary and discussion and get us back into the moment. They provide that commentary and illustration. So the publishing process moves forward, but when we research, we work backward to try to start with the summary, with new information, with resources, and then move backward to as close to the original source of the information as possible. So our knowledge also works backward. We have to start with the surface level information before we can get more in depth. For instance, experts writing and reading disciplinary specific texts like peer-reviewed articles, they're already experts. They're the writers and the intended audience. So they're going to have very disciplinary specific language and probably a lot of things that if you're a novice researcher on the issue, you don't understand as much. You have dates, terms, laws, perspectives, a lot of stuff that you need to know first in order to be able to dig into that scholarly article. So what's wrong with citing summary sources, with citing tertiary sources at the end of your research in your paper? Well, let's start here. There are a lot of different ways to use a source. There's knowledge building, which is often your tertiary sources. I got a little typo there. There's evidence for a point, which is often your secondary and primary sources, and an illustration of a point. Like if I were talking about film, I might like film and discrimination. I might use examples of films and do my own analysis and break them down, and that would be illustrating a point. Those are often your primary sources. Tertiary sources, they make great knowledge builders for your audience and for you as a researcher. They don't make great evidence because we're really thinking about genre and conventions, and specifically conventions of an academic audience. They're often too removed from the issue, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's also about personal credibility and respect as a creator of the text. With an academic community, they're going to look for, they're going to expect responsibility, analysis, expertise, complexity, nuance, hard work, respect for academic standards. And academic standards want more the meat of the conversation to be there rather than the summary of what should be there. So what's good about summary sources? First, they help novice researchers build knowledge about the issue, which we just talked about. To break that down, it helps you understand new perspectives or realizing what perspectives are out there, getting new questions and terms together for your research, learning background, getting new and better sources for your research. I'm going to pull up a couple of examples. The first one is from the Education Post, and the second one is from Healthline. So with this one, when you're scrolling through, you notice it's a little bit secondary because it gives commentary and it does take a stance on the issue, but it's tertiary in the sense that it's mostly going over questions and trying to give answers to questions about the issue. So what makes a standardized test? Why do students have to take so many tests? Why is the federal government involved? Why are standardized tests so controversial? So it goes through a lot of different information. It also gives you that good overview information and perspectives and information, like a broad scope of things that you could use for your research. It also gives you other sources you could look up. You could look up information about the Every Student Succeeds Act. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. You can go down and look at other questions, research shows. You can go to a scholarly article here. You can go to a lot of other information about this topic. It includes graphs and things like that just to help. Nation's report card. You can get some government documents from this, so just some other helpful things. Healthline is 14 easy ways to lower blood sugar and levels naturally. This is for a novice researcher just looking for information on this issue. But what you'll notice is, even though there's a lot of advertisements, which could be questionable, and even though it sounds like it's more overviewy, well, first, it is. But there's also a panel of experts that reviews this information to make sure it's correct. And it also provides excellent resources. So it provides you that overview information again, but also if you click here, it goes to a scholarly article. It goes to a government document. This is the CDC, government organization. You can keep scrolling through, and even though it's giving you some things you might assume, like exercise regularly. Well, we would probably know that. But you can go and look up more information about other issues. It gives you lots of links to respectable sources that you might be able to use for your own research. So it gives you that information on a new subject, and it gives you that those resources that you might need. So there's lots of sources on the internet that can serve a similar purpose as Wikipedia, like Healthline, which we just looked at. Like a lot of organization info materials, education sites, encyclopedias, history pages, things like that. They do help summarize information in simple ways. They teach. It's okay to learn from them, and it's okay to use them as a stepping stone. So what about objectivity? A lot of the reason people like tertiary sources is because they appear to be completely objective. They just list facts. Everyone wants just the facts. Well, that's great. However, there are a lot of things we misconstrue as fact. For instance, dates like when 9/11 happened, that's a fact. But study results, percentages, things that we often argue as fact, are actually debatable depending on the methodology of the study and its ability to be recreated. So, and even lists of facts are curated by someone. That person chose what facts to include and what facts to leave out. So it's still argumentative a little bit. There's still some influence there. And if you have all these lists of facts from different places, you have to fact check all of this information. And that's a lot too. And it gets a little bit trickier than that as well. Follow me on this example. So a primary source, you have a news story about an event written by a reporter on the scene that day. Great, cool. An essay referencing that reporter's point of view as part of their argument that came out maybe 5 years later. That's secondary. A tertiary source might be a Wikipedia page that uses that secondary source to report about that event. Okay, from a removed perspective. Now, what if the Wikipedia page you're using for your paper is actually citing a tertiary source, citing the secondary source, citing the primary source? Your reader is now going to notice that they are at the end of a potentially bad game of telephone. They're not close to the original information. They're actually 4 times removed, at least, from the original information. If your reader picks up on that, no matter how hard you maybe worked on your other research and other parts of the paper, it's going to hurt your ethos, it's going to hurt your credibility, and readers are going to question the depth of work that you did on this, researching this issue. Now let's talk about Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is actually pretty cool. It's an encyclopedia, it's a free encyclopedia, and it's collaborative. So it's a piece of commons-based peer production, which is actually really cool. There's all kinds of information you can get on Wikipedia that's completely free, which hasn't always been a thing. If you're breaking it down as a genre, its purpose is to provide lots of information on lots of different things like an encyclopedia. But in terms of how it looks, you have things that it offers you. It has a definition or an overview of the issue. It has a table of contents. It has history, terms, current situation, different perspectives maybe, further reading, sources, even discussion, so you can kind of see what's been added and what has changed, or what's been changed on that page and why. It's going to move chronologically. It's going to take on that professional black and white and objective tone and a standard style so that there's no real writerly presence in that text. So what can you do with Wikipedia and other tertiary sources like it? Well, first, some of the things that are bad about Wikipedia are also the same things that are good about Wikipedia. So open collaboration is great because it gives it a system of checks and balances. Lots of people with lots of different knowledge bases can come together and collaborate to share this information and to make sure that it's correct, make changes, have discussion, things like that. It's a little bit bad because one of the things we've heard about it is that because it's open collaboration, you never know what level of an expert the person is that's contributing. It's regularly updated. That can be a really great thing. It gives you especially as a popular issue, the most current information, the most current picture of the conversation taking place right now. However, when you have something that's regularly updated, it's really difficult to cite it as a source because it's regularly updated. It's not a static document. So you might cite something from that page that then gets changed. It does illustrate research as a conversation, which we've talked about, because things are constantly coming in. If there's a new study, a new event, a new problem, a new technology that influences it. You're going to have people coming in and making changes and updating it. You can see that conversation taking place. And it does help you learn about this topic, giving you some of those things that we talked about, like keywords for research and questions and different perspectives and helpful resources and things like that. It's not respected. In academia, it's very removed from the issue. If you Google the issue, Wikipedia is going to be one of the first things that pops up. Here's a problem with that. If you cite it in your paper, it says that you didn't start here, you stopped here at one of the first things that pops up in your Google search. So it kind of can, to a reader, connote laziness or connote a lack of knowledge because it says, I stopped at the beginning. And that's sometimes what's problematic about citing it. The gist about using Wikipedia and a lot of tertiary sources and things like that is to use them for what they are, as stepping stones. They're wonderful places to start. They're not great places to stop.